finish up the chapter. We've spent quite a bit of time here, I think the last month or so. And so it's time to say goodbye to John 11. Oh, Father, we thank you for being our God, and we thank you, Lord, for your faithfulness. We thank you for your goodness and for your mercy and grace. We ask, Heavenly Father, that you would be honored and that you would be glorified in this service this morning. Pray, Father, that you would get me out of your way, get me out of my own way, and would your Holy Spirit have his way this morning in the hearts and in the minds of your people. We pray, Lord Jesus, that we would surrender to you all that we are, Father, that we'd surrender our way of thinking, we'd surrender our view of what we think, and we would embrace what it is that you have for us, that we'd embrace the truth of who you are, Lord. We love you and we thank you for being our God, and we bless you and praise you in Jesus' name. Amen. There was a boy, and he was having a sleepover with his friend, and they were good friends, and the little boy's friend wasn't from a family of believers, whereas the house that they were staying at, they were solid believers. And they were in the room talking about Jesus and the Bible, and the little boy was telling the little friend how God created everything and how, he's the one that made the stars and the heavens and the moons and the planets, and he created us. And the other little boy was like, I don't know, that sounds kind of like a fairy tale. So my mom and dad told me it's a fairy tale. The little boy says, no. In church, we're even learning that Jesus came down and he was God in human form, and he raised the dead. And the little friend says, raise the dead? You can't raise the dead. He says, when you're dead, you're dead. So we learned about it. And he picked up his little children's Bible, and he was in John 11. He says, look, here it says Jesus raised Lazarus. And the little boy couldn't believe it. He said, well, let's play it out. Let's try it. And so they went to the mom's room, and they're pretending like the door shut was a cave. And he's like, this is what Jesus said. Lazarus, come forth. And as the boy said it, the mom opened the door. She was wearing a robe and a head wrap, and her face was covered in avocado. And the boys took off screaming because they thought, the dead! And they took off, and they went to the room, and the little boy says, I believe. And I say that little farce, little joke, that little story, because today we're going to see Jesus really do that. Today we're coming to the pinnacle of the point of John 11. And when we remember the purpose of John 11, correct? It was that they believe. And it was not only that they believe that Jesus be glorified. Remember, he says, I do this, Father, so that you would be glorified and that the Son would be glorified in you. The whole purpose of this is that they would see and know that the Son is equal with the Father. That they are in unity. And that not only does the Father have the power to raise the dead, that wasn't in question, but Jesus he's establishing the point that the Son has the power to raise the dead. In chapter 11, verse 38, it says, so Jesus again, being deeply moved within, came to the tomb. Now it was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. Now, we saw last week that Jesus was deeply moved once already, when all the people gathered around and they were watching the sisters, and Jesus sees that these people are making this commotion, and it really is what's the word I'm looking for here? It was a mockery. And we see as this mockery is taking place, it says Jesus was deeply moved. Now, do you guys remember what that meant to be deeply moved? He's angry. It really does not translate well in the English. It makes it sound like a very sentimental, wow, Jesus cared. And he did care. He loved them. We've already established that Jesus loved Lazarus. Jesus loved Martha and Mary. Jesus loved people. Jesus didn't tolerate nonsense, though. And these people are making a mockery of what has taken place. Now, why does the text start out today? And again, being deeply moved within, he came to the tomb. Well, if we want to know why, we got to look back just a little bit to verse 37. It says, but some of them said, some of the crowd, could not this man who opened the eyes of the blind have kept this man from dying? They're putting doubt. They're putting into question. They're essentially even asking the same question Martha and Mary asked. Where was he? Could he not have stopped this from happening had he been here? What good is it, Lord, to show up a day late and $1 short? Oh, the foolishness of humanity. God is never late. He's just not on your timetable. If you were the foreman, you make the calls. But the Bible says you're not a foreman. The Bible says you're a slave. That's what you are. Well, I don't want to be a slave. Then you don't belong to God. And you're still a slave. You're just not a slave of God. You're a slave of the devil. You don't get out of being a slave. You are a slave by nature. And if that makes you uncomfortable, it should. Not the slave part, the who your master is part. Yeah, we all serve something. I should say we all serve someone. For some of us, we serve money. We serve things. We serve other people. That's called the devil. That's his system. Or you serve the Lord. Jesus said it like this: you can't serve God and mammon. You don't get to serve both. You serve one or the other. If you serve the Lord, then you are the Lord's slave. If you don't serve the Lord, by default, you are a slave of the enemy. Dang, was that Dave? As the soul of the music coming through, as the heart of his bass. But it reverberated. It just took a while to get from his feet back up through his phone. No, but you're either by default a slave of God or a slave of Satan. You don't get to pick. Well, it's not true you get to pick, but you don't get to pick otherwise. You're either God or the devil. Well, I'm my own slave. That's called humanism. That's one of the many forms that Satan has instituted in humanity. That is actually the fastest growing religion, humanism. You don't get to pick outside of those two choices. You're God's or you're the devil's. And so they're here, and they're basically putting Jesus into question. They're arising further doubt. And so it says, again, being deeply moved. The Greek word is embrymaomahi. And it means to be flared in the nostrils. It literally means to snort, the way a horse snorts. And for us, we grew up watching Looney Tunes, so you think, remember the big bull? When it'd get angry, what would it do? Its nostrils would flare out and it blows steam out. That's the idea. He'd be angry. And it made him angry that they were putting into question who he was. A lot of us have this same attitude towards Jesus. We say, couldn't Jesus have saved my son? Couldn't Jesus have saved my wife? Couldn't Jesus have saved my marriage? Couldn't Jesus have saved my job? Couldn't Jesus have saved whatever it is that you have in your mind? Well, yeah, the answer is he totally could have. Sometimes that's just the natural course of life, though. Sometimes people die. Sometimes just that's what happens. Sometimes it's the consequence of our actions. Sometimes God allows it because he's going to do something better and bigger and greater. And he's going to do something with it. Could Jesus have shown up in time for Lazarus? Probably not. Nah, he couldn't. I mean, he could have because he's God, but by the time he got the message, he's been dead. We've already established how long he's been there. How long has he been dead for? 4 days. After Jesus got the message, he waited how long? 2 days. How long was the trip from where they were at, from Bethany to, it's a day journey. So by the time they get to Jesus, he's already dead because it took him a day to get there. He waited 2 days, and now he's come, and it's been 4 days. So it's likely that Lazarus died shortly after the messenger left. 4 days, he's already been dead. But I mean, Jesus is God. He could have come a week early if he wanted. But by the time he got the message, now, again, why did Jesus wait so long? Because he's going to make a point. The whole purpose and what he's about to do is so that you would believe and so that he would be glorified. So that he would be glorified. Don't worry about him, you guys. He's good. The parent in you is going to go, oh my gosh, my son's making little noises. But it's okay. Psst, psst. It's okay. Don't let it get you. Don't let it get you. But so sometimes it's the natural course of life. Again, other times it's the consequences of our actions and our choices. And sometimes God allows bad things to happen because he wants to do something with it. Now, John gives an interesting detail here in verse 38. He says when he came to the tomb, he mentions that the tomb was a cave and a stone was lying against it. Why would John give that type of information? It kind of seems kind of like a nuance, right? Because that was a common practice in Judaism in the early first century, is they would either bury people in the ground or in the cave. For those who were buried in the cave, we remember they would be wrapped, they'd be anointed with all kinds of spices and oils because bodies are stinky when they decay, and that would help mask some of that stink. And then after about a year's time, they'd come and collect the bones and put them in a not a big box, but a decent sized stone carved box called an ossuary, and you'd stack it on the shelf and you'd wait for the resurrection. So why would John give this detail? This is something his readers should readily understand and know, right? No. You guys remember when John is writing his gospel? Approximately 90 AD. It's towards the latter part of the first century. And by this time, Rome, Titus Caesar, has come and he's made a move against Jerusalem, against Israel, and he's overthrown Jerusalem. The temple's already been mauled down. And at this point, the Jews have been removed, or many of them have fled, I should say. The diaspora has started, that 2,000-year diaspora that took place. And John isn't in Israel. He's in Ephesus. And he's writing this from Ephesus. And so, to many of his readers, they wouldn't fully understand what he's talking about. So I believe John throws that little nugget in there for his readers so that they would know this is one of the rituals of a Jewish burial. Not in all cases. There are times when Jews would be buried into the ground. We think of Rachel, the skunk, remember? She was a skunk. She stole her sister's husband. You know? And she got buried in the ground. She got tossed on the side of the road under a tamarisk tree. Leah got the tomb. She got the good burial. But in this case, he explains why the tomb, why the rock. In verse 39, it says, Jesus said, remove the stone. Now, the stone was a big stone. I've been to Israel and I've seen the stones. Some stones are smaller than others. Some are really big. It doesn't really matter. Have you ever tried to remove like a rock that's tire-sized? You ain't moving it. It's big. It takes several people to get that stone rolled away. It's no small feat. As a matter of fact, often when they would have these stones removed, it would kind of go on an incline, and there'd be a little platform up here, and then you roll it off, and it'd slam into place. And the point was to keep that thing shut. Why? Because there's a decaying body in there. When it's shut, anyway. And so removing a stone is no small feat. It's actually really rough. That was one of the concerns that the ladies had when they went to the tomb of Jesus on the day of resurrection. How are we going to move the stone? It's a big stone. It's going to take several men. And we're just some little women. No offense if you're a woman, but little women. He tells them, remove the stone. Now, when he tells them to remove the stone, it prompts Martha to react the way she reacts. Jesus said, remove the stone. Martha, the sister of the deceased, said to him, Lord, by this time there will be a stench, for he has been dead 4 days. Now, I don't like the way it says that in my version. I read out of the New American Standard Bible, which is a more accurate translation word for word from the Greek. But sometimes in translations, it doesn't matter which one it is, it gets the essence wrong. The New King James hits the essence better. She says, Lord, he stinks. And if you're old King James, we all love, Lord, he stinketh. He's got that pit smell coming out, Lord. But it was a little bit stinkier than pits. His body's decaying. Now, in the Jewish culture, when a person died, they would immediately start the burial process. Because when somebody dies, do you know how long it takes for decay to start working? Immediately, the second you die, your body starts to decay. Now, you probably don't want to hear what I have to say, but I'm going to say it because I put it in my notes. Within 3 hours, being post-mortem, rigor mortis sets in. Your body stiffens, and it starts to get cold. Within 24 to 72 hours, within the first 3 days, internal organs begin to decompose due to cell death, and the body begins to emit pungent odors, and the rigor mortis subsides. You start to loosen up. as everything starts to break down, all the gases start to expand, and you start to stink. That's why, again, I worked in funeral business. This is a rule of thumb. When somebody dies, you get them as fast as you can, and you embalm them as fast as humanly possible. Now, the embalming process takes what it takes, but you want to get them on that table. You want to get the blood out and the embalming fluid in. Do you know why? For preservation purposes. Because the longer that body sits, like I've had that where a body sat there for too long, and what happens is, so you make an incision here on the neck. Let's see which side. Yep, right here. You pull out the vein, and you pull out the artery, and you cut the vein. You open it up, and you allow the blood to come out. You cut the artery, and you push the embalming fluid through, and it pushes the blood out, and it replaces it with embalming fluid. If the body sits too long, that artery and vein become very weak, and it can become really messy and nasty. I know it's gross. I did this for a living. But that's your body starts to break down immediately. Within 3 days, you start to stink. It's the 4th day, Lord. He smells. Now, you guys don't need to know this, but I'm going to tell you anyway because I had to learn it. Yeah. Within 3 to 5 days, organs continue to decompose and bodily fluids leak. The skin turns a greenish color. Within 8 to 10 days, the body turns from green to red as the blood decomposes and the gases accumulate. Within 2 weeks, teeth and nails fall out. And within the first month, the corpse begins to liquefy and turns to a dark sludge. And then you go back to the earth. Kind of like turning to dust, right? But a little messier. But this is what Lazarus... John is making a point. You guys want to know what John's point is? He's dead. He's not coming back. Again, we saw that last week. The Jews had this belief that the spirit of a person, the soul of a person, lingered for how many days? 3 days, up to 4. And on the 4th day, the soul would depart because it would recognize the body. There was no more hope for that person. He was stinking. He was fully into decomposing. He was fully decomposing. There's nothing we can do about it. And they believed that the soul would depart. Jesus' point is this person is irreparable. There's nothing that could bring this person back except an act of God. That's his point. That is exactly John's point. Martha, however, still doesn't understand. When Jesus came, do you guys remember Martha's response? Lord, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. But then she corrects herself. But I know that you're the Messiah, and on the last day he'll rise again. And Jesus corrects her and says, Martha, I am the resurrection. Ego eimi. He called himself God. He is the Lord of the resurrection. It doesn't have to be on the last day. I can raise them when I please. At will, I call them and they come forward. She didn't fully understand that, though, because she's still here. Lord, he stinks. Don't open that tomb. Good morning. Lord, he stinks. She still didn't understand. Jesus realigns Martha's way of thinking. In verse 40, I'm going to back up a little bit. Martha, the sister of the deceased, said to him, Lord, by this time, and I should say that word deceased there means permanently dead. And I'll get into that here in a moment. But John, again, making a very solid point. She said to him, Lord, by this time there will be a stench. He stinks, for he has been dead 4 days. Jesus said to her, did I not say to you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? Did I not say that if you believe, you would see the glory of God? Now, what's incredible is Jesus just told her that, right? For us, it's been a week. For them, it's been just a couple minutes. Jesus just finished telling her, Martha, believe in me. I am the resurrection. Believe in me, and you'll never die. Your brother has not tasted death to die permanently. He's going to live. And remember when it says he'll rise again, is that what it says in the Greek? What does it say? Does nobody remember? He will rise. Present tense. He's going to rise. But how fickle the mind is and how quickly we forget what God shows us. I watch that as a pastor. This is one of the most despairing things about my job. Is I pour into people and watch them immediately go out and do the exact opposite of everything I just poured into them. It's despairing. Like, this is one of the most depressing things about this job. I will sit there for hours and blah, 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 and then they'll go out and do exactly everything I said not to do. It's the craziest thing. But that's the fickle mind. Jesus himself just told Martha everything she needed to hear. 15 seconds have gone by and she's back to her way of thinking. Did I not say that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? Verse 41, so they removed the stone. Then Jesus raised his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but because of the people standing around, I said it, so that they may believe that you sent me. The first thing I want you to notice is he addresses the Father as Father. This was uncommon in Judaism. They didn't call God Father. Actually, they called God often Hashem, the name. They wouldn't even refer to him by his actual name. You guys remember the name of God? Yahweh. That is his name. It's the only name that he's ever ascribed to himself. Every other thing that we call him is a title. They're titles. Great titles. Beautiful titles. But the only name he's ever ascribed to himself is Yahweh. And then in his incarnation, Yeshua. That's it. There's no other name given to God. That's it. But when Jesus calls him Father, this is an intense form of intimacy. This is him establishing his unity with the Father. That's one of the beauties in Christianity. We have that right to come before the living God and call him our Father, Dad, intimate Dad. You'll often hear me say that, Dad, in my prayers, or even when I'm teaching. And I'm not referring to my earthly father. I'm referring to my heavenly Father. He is my Father. He is my truest Father. That is my all in all when it comes to Daddy. That's him. Jesus calls him Father. That is a huge, huge move on Jesus' part. He says, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. Now, it appears that God has already heard him, whatever it is he said. What I find odd is John didn't record what he said. We don't know what he said. But we know he said something. You know how I know? Because of verse 42. I knew that you always hear me, but because of the people standing around, I said it. Which means he didn't intend to say it, but he said it so that they would hear. What did he say? I don't know what he said. We're not told what he said. John doesn't tell us what he said. It obviously wasn't for us. But I said it so that they may believe that you sent me. Verse 43, when he had said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. Whew. Lazarus, come forth. I want you to look. I said I'll tell you guys something about death here. He says, the man who died came. Well, I'm going to back up. When he had said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And in verse 44, it says, the man who died came forth. Now, we've talked about death in the past. We've covered the different types of death. When we speak of death, there are several ways death can be taken. For English, we just call it you're dead, death. But in the Greek, not so much. In the Greek, nekros means death. But it's a specific type of death. It's inanimacy. So like we think of like this little cup here. We'd say this thing is dead, right? It's not alive, it's dead, it's inanimate. There's no life in it. And when a person dies, that person's body becomes inanimate. But in death, it takes place in two facets. There's the bodily death, where your body is just inanimate, but also the spirit. There's a death that takes place, so to speak, with the spirit. And that's the word thanatos. And in Greek, it means to separate. When your soul separates or your spirit separates from your body. So now you have your body here and your spirit is departed. Separation. Death. There's a final death that's coming. The Bible says, don't take part in that death. He says, blessed is everybody who takes part in the first death. But that second death, no, don't do that one. The first death is the death of the soul and the body. Your body separates, your soul separates from your body. Or your spirit separates from your body. The second death is when you separate from God, who is life, for eternity, for foreverness. You know, I don't like the word eternity. I have to explain to you guys why. But for permanence, you separate from God. That's the second death. You don't want any part in that death. Blessed is he who doesn't have any part in the second death. But that first death, we'll all experience that. So you have nekros, which means to be inanimate, and you have thanatos, which means to separate. When he says the man who has died, the Greek word is tethenokos. And in the Greek, that is put in the perfect tense. And the idea behind tethenokos, it's not just to be separated, it's to be a permanent. That perfect tense, it's done. It's a done deal. There is no coming back for Lazarus. He's dead, and he can't come back. Even if he came back, his body couldn't house his spirit anymore because the process of decay has started, and it's so far along, it's irreversible. John is making a very specific point. Laz is so dead, he's deadly dead. He's double dead. Homeboy is done. You know, you might as well have cremated him because he ain't coming back. That's a good one. You guys ever, I get this question quite often, especially when there's funerals going on. What happens if you get cremated? Can God still do something with that? Well, I don't know. God did create everything from nothing. So, how hard would it be for God to regather your, particles? That's a legit question. I understand where people are coming from, but yes, if you get cremated, it's not the end. Will you grab me a piece of tissue, somebody? Oh, there was some right there, and I got jacked. Somebody, anybody. It can be from the bathroom. I'm ghetto. It's cool. We're on the way. Go look outside. Does this place look like it's in some special fancy place? No, I can't do those. I got handkerchiefs, but I can't stick in and put. I'm good. Thank you, brother. Oh dang, gave me enough to wipe more than my nose. Sorry. All right, but that was a full wipe. But the death that John is making a point of is it's irreversible. And Jesus' point is he wants to show the power of God, that power is his and his to command and control. Irreversible, permanent death, tethenekos. So in verse 44, it says, the man who died came forth, bound hand and foot with wrappings. He would have looked like a mummy. This would have been every kid's nightmare. I'd imagine the kids that were standing by probably freaked out. I liked that little story in the beginning because that would have been a traumatic moment. Ah! They probably heard about the mummies in Egypt. Egypt is just right down the south central, South Central Middle East. You just go down south and Egypt's right there and all the mummies, and I'm for sure they got lots of scary stories that the little Jewish boys would tell. And a mummy comes forward. Holy smokes. It's not like Lazarus unwrapped himself, because when they wrapped you pretty tight. Wobbling because his legs aren't free. They wrap your legs. He's wobbly. He waddles on over, so Jesus tells them, unbind him. The man who came forth bound hand and foot with wrappings and his face wrapped around with cloth. Jesus said, unbind him and let him go. I absolutely love that. There is imagery here that's taking place that should be absolutely relatable to each and every one of us. If you've been born again, we've all experienced this. That day when Jesus called your name, that day you heard the call of salvation come, and you came forth bound hand and foot and face wrapped. And all of a sudden, the Spirit of God starts to unbind and loosen, and that cloth comes off your face, and you see for the first time. You feel for the first time. You're alive for the first time. This is what happens to every person who is born again. They're unbound. I love that picture right here. Unbind him and let him go. Now, I read right over it because I was going to go back and say this. At the tomb, Jesus says, Lazarus, come forth. And most of you have heard this. And so you know where I'm going. If Jesus would have just said, come forth, what would have possibly happened? Everybody would have came forward. That very well may be what happens in the resurrection. Jesus says, rise, and we all... And that may be the rapture at the rapture. That may be exactly what takes place. I don't know. It doesn't tell us. It's very possible that he calls him by name for that purpose. I sat there and I kind of looked at this and I pondered at this and I thought maybe. Or Let me back up. The thing that bothered me, because whenever I'm studying for a text, I come across texts that bother me. So sometimes I sit there for hours, and I sit there for hours. I'm just looking at the text. I'm talking to God. I'm contemplating, and I'm a chess player. So what I do is I just play out scenarios in my head as like 50, 60 scenarios. I just back and forth. Sometimes I even pace back and forth. If you didn't live in my house and you saw me studying, because sometimes it's like at 2 in the morning, you probably think I'm a drug addict. I'll be pacing around back and forth and just talking to myself. And then I've told you guys before, like if in the summer when it gets hot and the flies come or the mosquitoes come, I turn off all the lights and I get my flashlight because that's the only way you can see them. So I probably look like a hardcore drug addict shooting salt at the ceilings. but I sit and I pace back and forth, and it's true. Don't be peeking at my windows at night. That would be creepy. But I was sitting here thinking about this verse, and it bothered me. And let me tell you why. I want you to just imagine for a moment that you had telekinesis, that you were able to control things with your mind, right? Let's say I wanted to lift this chair. Would I have to say chair lift to make it lift? No, as a complex being, I should be able to think the thought, and I should be able to focus my thought on what I want to do, and it should be, right? So God being God, does God have to actually articulate his words in order to make something happen? No, I don't believe so. So could he not have just said, come forth, Lazarus and mine, and only Lazarus come forth? Yeah, why not? Unless God is not able to do that, which I highly would doubt that. So why does he say, Lazarus, come forth? No. Well, maybe, I don't know. That's not what I have in mind, though. Entertain this. Perhaps he calls him by name. Him calling him by name was a form of intimacy. And imagine that on the day that we get called, that trumpet that the Bible talks about, perhaps we're going to hear our names. Walter, up. When in Matthew chapter 7, when Jesus is, standing before people and they're all confessing that they knew him, do you remember what he tells them? They're going to say, Lord, did we not? Did we not? Did we not? And Jesus is going to declare to them, I never knew you. Jesus is calling Lazarus by name, somewhat as a declaration that he knows Lazarus. That there's an intimacy between Jesus and Lazarus. Could it be that's why he calls him by name? And could it be that on that day of resurrection for us, that God will call you by name and that you will hear your name and you will go up as he calls you? That you're not just going to be some head in the bunch, that you're going to be unique and special to God in a very beautiful way. Isn't that one of the beauties in the church? One of the detriments and the beauties in the church. The detriment is we get lost in the crowds. And you're just some random face in a body of people. The beauty is you're not. That's not true at all. Each of you have a beauty and a complexity about you, and each of you has a distinct character and a distinct gift, and you are beautifully crafted, created, and molded by God for his purposes. And you're not just a face in the crowd. You have purpose, you have meaning, you have worth. And I believe that's part of the essence of him knowing us, is that value. That's where that value comes for us. In us is that there is worth. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. A bunch of good mornings. And that value that God has for us, that intimacy that God has with us. Could it be? I don't know. We're not told. But again, I've always heard that if he didn't call Lazarus by name, everybody would have came for him. Maybe. I just think God's bigger than that. And if I'm wrong, then Lord, forgive me for thinking you're so big. Yeah, I know, right? The stupidity in that statement. I really believe it was more about the intimacy of Jesus knowing him. But it's always fun to say a bunch of dead people would have came out, so we'll say it too. A bunch of dead people would have came out. We're in chapter 11 of John. He tells them to unbind him and let him go. A lot of people live like that. Lazarus being dead, the state of death is representative of who you were before Christ. Oh man, the imagery that God gave to us in this. We were all like Lazarus. We were bound, blind, dead, and decaying. And then Jesus says, come forth. You know, when I got born again that day, and I know it's not like this for everybody, but I remember every moment of that day. At least that time frame of that day. I don't remember what the pastor was saying, no clue. I remember how he was moving. I remember how he was gesturing. I remember the call going out. And I remember my hand going up. I remember coming to life. And I remember walking out of the church that day, and I was different. And I couldn't verbalize the difference, but I was different. I remember looking up at the sky and be like, dang, it's blue. It's always been blue, but it's like a special blue now. And I was walking in my car, I'm like, wow, that tree is really green. Look how beautiful these rocks are. Rocks. I'd come across like a dead plant and I'd be stunned. Like, wow. Look how beautiful this is. Oh, I'd see the sunset and it would like captivate me. All of a sudden, I started seeing the beauty in creation, in life, because I was no longer dead. All of us were once like Lazarus. Again, I heard my name called. Have you heard your name called? Better yet, did you answer? And did you come forth when your name was called? Amen. How was your name called? You feel that burning conviction in your heart when the gospel is being preached or the word of God is being taught. When you're being called to a place of repentance, you feel that burn. Do you remain dead? Or do you come forth and allow God to unbind you? Lazarus came forward. And it says in verse 45, therefore, many of the Jews who came to Mary and saw what he had done, believed in him. Now, that's an important little word that, we should learn, therefore, especially if you're going to be a student of the Bible. That word is important because it's there for a purpose. It's easy for people to pick up in the text and they'll start reading, and therefore so and so and so and so and so. And the reason that therefore is there is to keep the context of what was said before the prior statement. Excuse me. So the Jews believed. Why did they believe? Because of everything that just happened. They knew Lazarus was dead. How did they know Lazarus was dead? Because they've been there for 4 days, mourning with the sisters. He's been in that tomb. He's been wrapped, and he stinks. His body has already set into decay, full decay, bloat and stench. Irreversible. And he comes out whole. You gotta love the way God does things. We talked about this in Exodus when they made the mass exodus out of Egypt. They came to the Red Sea and God parts the seas for them. We remember they go into that Sinai Peninsula at the bottom. We're not going to get into all the details, but we know why they went down there, and we know for a fact where they went and crossed, and how they crossed, then went into the Median Desert. They were 100% trapped. There was nowhere for Israel to go. They were down in a little bowl. Egypt came around. They're blocked. They can't go up. They can't go. They're stuck. They're 100% stuck. Then Egypt is right there on them. And what does God do? He blocks them. As far as Israel's concerned, God, you brought us here to die. There's nowhere to go. We're done. And then God parts the seas. God often takes us to a place of no hope. Because then when he shows up, our faith increases. There is no hope. There's nothing anybody could say. Jesus did some kind of trick. Jesus, No. Everybody's concurred. Lazarus is dead. He's dead. The Greek says tethenesco. He's rotting. The worms have already, they come to snack. But then he comes out whole, no stench, fully intact, formed. Therefore, because of all that, they believed. Many of the Jews believed. That was the purpose all along. That's the purpose of this entire gospel. So that you believe. So that you believe. A lot of us believe, but we don't really believe. Some of us have enough intellect to take it in and say, I believe, because I've studied and I've learned, but we don't believe with our spirituality and we don't believe with our actions. We believe with the intellectual sentiment. That's it. Is we'll confess Jesus here, but we won't confess Jesus here. We'll confess him here, but we won't confess him with our feet when we go out. Don't be that Christian that believes here and here. As a matter of fact, this word believe, it's the Greek word pisteo. It's a verb. It's a verb. It's an action. When we talk about faith, it's the Greek word pistis. That deals with the mental assent. When we believe here, it should affect what we do here. And if what we do with our hands and feet doesn't correlate with what we say we believe, then you have to ask yourself, do you really believe? Or, as I've posed the question before, do you really believe what you believe is really real? Is there life change when you go forward? I promise you this, Lazarus ain't the same Lazarus when he went forward. I guarantee you that. I guarantee you everybody that believed that day, it was real belief. As a matter of fact, it's the type of belief that could lead someone to death for the name of their Savior. Because every last one of the apostles, except for Judas, was brutally tortured. Most of them killed for their faith. John wasn't killed, but he was boiled in oil. So, I mean, that's good as, that counts. You get boiled in oil, that counts. And then you get kicked out into an island that's desolate. You were supposed to die. It was good. He died for his faith. Do you believe what you believe is really real? I hate when Christians today, they talk about how, when the persecution comes, that they're going to be ready, they're going to stand. And I'm like, bro, you don't even obey God now. Dude, it's easy. It's easy right now. You don't even obey God with the simple things that are set before you. Amen. You think you're going to obey God when they have a knife to your son's throat? You think you're going to obey God when they tell you that you can't buy food without a certain stamp? You think we're fools. But that's the course of humanity, right? We think we have it under control. Do you believe what you believe is really real? Or is it just sentiment? I don't know. That's between you and God. Figure it out. But if your life doesn't reflect Christ on the daily, and I'm not saying, that pastor's up there, he thinks he's better than us. I don't think anything. That's for you. That's as much for me as it is you. You do with that what you will. It's between you and God, not between you and me. It's between you and him. And I have to answer that same question. But many of them believed. And so, as is common with the religious leaders, when Jesus shows up and does incredible things, the religious people want him dead. In verse 46, it says, "But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them the things that Jesus had done." So some of them went to the Pharisees and they told them what had happened. Now, we're not told if what was said was malicious. I read a lot of commentators that said, of course it was malicious. That's why they went to the Pharisees. But that's not necessarily true because Nicodemus was a believer, right? We've already seen Nicodemus in John 3. It appears him and Jesus totally connected. And then later in the Gospel of John, Nicodemus stands up for Jesus as they're having a council meeting, remember? And we're going to see at the end of the gospel that Nicodemus is one of the ones taking the body of Christ down, making a public declaration of his faith in the Messiah. So not all Pharisees and not all Sadducees were bad. By and far, it was a whacked out, system. But many of them became believers. We're not told what was said exactly or how what was said to these Pharisees. It just says they went and they told them what happened. They relayed the facts. They recount what happened. Doesn't say that they were paid to do so in order to find something to trap him in. Maybe they went excited, like, guys, we were there. Lazarus was dead. And this dude called him out and he came forward. But have you ever tried to talk to somebody? You ever tried to talk sense into somebody who's bitter? How does that go? It doesn't ever go. It's like talking to a drunk, or it's like talking to a wall. Or it's like talking to Jehovah's Witness. you know, you know, that's what. Seriously, they're all the same. You just at some point you're just like, yeah, I'm good. Good luck. Good luck. I'll pray for you. Hopefully you don't go to hell. But it's really what it's like talking to. The Pharisees have not been interested by and far in Jesus as their Messiah. There's a lot of things they don't like about him. They don't like that he didn't come from their schools. They don't like that he's not part of their system. They don't like that he avidly teaches against their traditions. They don't like that his mama had him outside of wedlock. We've seen the culmination of what was said. They've said some pretty nasty verbal things to him. By and far, they don't like him because he doesn't fit their persona of what the Messiah should be. So they come, they recount what happened. I wonder if they went in excitement and were met with contempt. Have you ever done that where you're excited to share something with somebody? Especially if you've been a new convert to the faith and you go to tell your family. It usually doesn't go over too well if they're not believers. You're met with kind of like a blocked wall and a fire extinguisher, right? What are you doing? Going to that church. Or they're just a bunch of dirty little snitches. I don't know. We're not told. But they relay to the Pharisees what happened. And they told them what was done. In verse 47, therefore the chief priests and the Pharisees convened a council. And we're saying, what are we doing? For this man is performing many signs. If we let him go on like this, all men will believe in him. And the Romans will come and take away our place and our nation. These guys come to the Pharisees and they say, hey guys, Jesus showed up to Lazarus' funeral. Now remember, these, I don't want to call them the Bethany sisters and brother because Bethany was a city, but Lazarus, Martha, and Mary appear to be a wealthy family. They appear to be a prominent family, very well known. So of course there's going to be many religious leaders there. They come and they say, guys, we're at the tomb with Lazarus and the sisters, and Jesus showed up. Called Lazarus forth, came out. Forth, I think I said force. Called him forth, and he came out. And their immediate response is, how can we stop this guy? How can we stop this pesky preacher? They convene and we're saying, what are we doing? For this man is performing many signs. If we let him go on like this, all men will believe in him. That's the point. That's exactly the point. Now, I find it interesting. They don't deny the miracles. They don't deny anything that he's done. They are rather afraid that Rome is going to come take away their land and their people. That's their fear. They're not denying anything he's done. As a matter of fact, throughout history, that's one of the beautiful evidences of Jesus being the Christ, the Son of the living God, is even his enemies didn't deny his works. The early Jews didn't say he didn't do them. Many of them, I should say, saw what was done. You can't deny it. Many were there at that tomb and they saw Lazarus come forth. They didn't deny his works. They just denied him because he didn't fit their idea. Too many of us have an idea of Jesus, and if that's you, stop. Jesus isn't who you think he should be. He's who he is. And you take him at who he says he is, or don't take him at all. You don't get to recreate the image of Christ in your mind. I can't stand when people talk about the white man's Jesus. I'm like, bro, I want to slap the daylights out of you. White man, how ignorant that is, bro. It's just stupidity. If you don't know something, just don't say, just shut up. Don't talk. Go talk to a wall. Yeah. When people talk and they don't know what they're talking about and they're just, dude, shut up. You're looking stupid. You sound stupid. You're proving to be exactly what you're presenting. Stupid. Stop. You're mean, Walter. Bro, if it quacks like a duck, call it a duck. Call it what it is. It's stupidity is what it is. Let's not mask it up and call it something else. If you don't know something, it's okay to say, I don't know. But when people say Jesus is a white man's God, a white man's Savior, he was a Jew. Jews, by and far, aren't white. Actually, Most people are actually white. Most of us in here are actually white. Even on the browner side, you're considered white. Brown isn't on the scale when you die and they pull up your death certificate. You're red, yellow, black, or white. Every single person in here, except for you, is white. All of us. Oh no, I'm not white. Nah, you're white. Maybe you too. Depends on which way you want to vote. He's like, he didn't see me. I see you. But by and far, we're white. It's what it is. Yeah, we're brown. We're Chicano. Soy Chicano. Yeah. But on your death certificate, it's not going to say Soy Chicano. It's not going to say Mexican either. You're going to be white. But the idea of anglicized white, you know what I mean? Blonde hair, blue eyes, we're from England. We thus talk it like that. No, that's just stupidity. Jesus was a Middle Eastern Jew. And Christianity was in Africa before it was in England. It was in Asia before it was in England, Asia Minor. It's not a white man's religion. It's not even a religion. It's simply the truth. Amen. That's what it is. We live out truth. Not a religion. You can call it a relationship, that's fine, but it's a truth. It's the truth. That's what it is. So when people tell you about the white man's religion, explain to them how stupid they really are and say, stop. Stop. You know, I don't pretend to talk about things I don't know because then I look stupid. I'm not a fan of looking stupid. I've done it. And afterwards I feel stupid, so I stop. If I'm going to talk about something, I'm going to study it and then I'll present what I know. But anyways, I'm over here talking for nothing. But in verse 48, let me back up, where am I at? Oh, verse 49 actually. But one of them named Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, said to them, "You know nothing at all, nor do you take into account that it is expedient for you that one man die for the people, and that the whole nation not perish." Now, it mentions here that Caiaphas is the high priest. And we're going to see this is going to pose what we call an apparent contradiction later. Do you guys remember what an apparent contradiction is? It's when something appears to be contradictory, but it's not. It's called an apparent contradiction. It's not an actual contradiction. Later, we're going to see Annas is called the high priest. And might I add, we're coming up to the last week of Jesus' life. Next week, we officially start the last 7 days of Jesus' earthly ministry. So John is going to spend roughly, 9 chapters on his last week. But how is it that Caiaphas is called the high priest here? And then we're going to see in the coming months, Annas is called the high priest. Well, there's an answer to that. Caiaphas was made high priest in AD 18 by the Roman prefect Valerius Gratus. He was the son-in-law to Annas, who served as high priest from AD 6 to AD 15. Now, if you've been with us on Wednesday nights, there's a bit of an issue here. We've been learning, remember in Exodus, about the priesthood and the high priest and the garments and all the yada, yada, yada. It's interesting, both tonight and right now, Wednesday nights comes into big place. So if you've showed up on Wednesday nights, it's going to be rich for you. When does the high priest give up his role? When? When he dies. He doesn't get to give up his role. The high priest is the high priest. And when he dies, he's no longer the high priest. Who's the next high priest? The next eldest son. That's how the high priesthood works. When Rome came in, Rome was very finicky in control. They liked things a certain way, but the Jews, they had to put a lot of leeway because, as God says throughout the wilderness wanderings, they're a bunch of stiff-necked people. And so Rome gave the Jews a lot of leeway. They got to primarily keep their religion, they kept their status, but Rome was in charge. But Rome put who they wanted in charge as far as, we'll keep him a Jew. So Annas is made high priest, Caiaphas is made high priest instead of Annas. But Annas is the actual high priest. But he's in the position, and we're going to see that God still uses the position. And so it appears that they're arguing back and forth. Now, why would they be arguing back and forth? Probably because some of them embraced what was being said. Kind of like Nicodemus. I'd imagine that an argument took place, and then Caiaphas steps in and he says, Who am I? Who was high priest that year said to them, you know nothing at all. Obviously to the ones who were arguing in the favor of Jesus. He says, nor do you take into account that it is expedient for you that one man die for the people, and that the whole nation not perish. He says it's better for one man to die in the place of all than for all to perish. Does that sound familiar to you? That's what we believe. That's the essence of the cross. Jesus died in our stead, and his death brought about our life. We live because he died. One man died so that all might live. That's Paul's, one of his pinnacles in his theology in the book of Romans. But Annas says this. He didn't realize what he was saying, though. He prophesied, John tells us in verse 51. Now, he did not say this on his own initiative, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus was going to die for the nation. And not for the nation only, but in order that he might also gather together into one the children of God who are scattered abroad. So Annas didn't realize what he was saying. However, he's prompted in his spirit and he says it. Now, I find this interesting because he's not even the actual high priest. He's the acting high priest. The actual high priest is Annas, but nonetheless, he's in the position, and so God uses him. And there's a very real principle for us to pull here. God will use someone in a position regardless of their wickedness or their goodness. Realize that. The Bible tells us that God allows our leaders, right? So, as much as this stinks, God's the one that allowed Biden to be in the office. Why would God do that? Because have you seen America? We have exactly what we deserve. Well, I don't like what you're saying. I don't really care. We are a wicked, evil nation that needs to repent. We're not that bad. Dude, we murder more. Did you know that abortion is the greatest genocide in humanity? Not of our time, in humanity. I could think of maybe one that was bigger, the flood. And that was God wiping out the evil. Abortion is the greatest genocide perpetuated on humanity. And the worst part is we're slaughtering babies. And we make it sound good by calling them fetuses. Remember I talked about stupidity? Poor stupid people, because fetus is Latin for baby. It's not a baby, it's a fetus. Oh, child, go get away from me. It's incredible. But God uses evil in spite of evil. And I'm going to tell you the detriment and the danger in that. Sometimes us as Christians do evil things, and God will still work it together for good. And we'll think, maybe it was okay what I did because God used it. No, that's not how that works. Just because God will use something in spite of you doesn't mean it has the approval of God. Hear that? That's the enemy saying, I'm going to jack up this message because they're talking about abortion. You know, alarm going to stop me. I'll turn this thing up. I'll blast your ears out. You know, but I forgot what I was saying now. But one of the detriments is when we do evil and God still works it together for good is we get the inclination to think that somehow maybe it's okay. Like we have sex before marriage and we don't blow up into little pieces or start on fire and burn to death. Maybe God blessed it. No, that's grace. That's grace. You keep doing it, you're going to experience the judgment of God. Or we still and we didn't get arrested. Oh, you know, if I lie over here, well, maybe it's not so bad. God, I'm still being blessed for now. For now. Even when we stop spending time with God, that's evil. That's evil in and of itself. When we start to reject God, we stop spending time in His Word. We stop spending time in His presence. We stop worshiping. We stop. But things seem to be going good. My work is flourishing. The money's coming in. Everything seems good for now. And maybe it'll stay good monetarily. How's your peace? How do you sleep at night? How's your marriage? How's life? How are your kids? Just because God will allow blessings to come in spite of our wickedness is not some kind of approval that God is saying, it's okay, just keep doing what you're doing. That is stupid. And I think many of us have fallen into that trap of stupidity. I've done that. Stop. Because it comes to a point where you meet the head of the spear and the judgment of God sucks, is what I'll tell you. And it never comes the way you think it's coming. But, verse 53. So from that day on, they planned together to kill him. Now they're actively seeking to put him to death. Verse 54. Therefore, Jesus no longer continued to walk publicly among the Jews, but went away from there to the country near the wilderness into a city called Ephraim. And there he stayed with the disciples. Because they were looking to kill him, Jesus no longer walked publicly. But I thought Jesus came to die. What's the problem? His time had not yet come. Jesus didn't just come to die. He came to die at the appropriate time. Right? As we've studied over the laws on Wednesday night, we've seen many of the feasts. Jesus came to fulfill those feasts. He came to fulfill the law. And part of that fulfilling the law is fulfilling the law. You know, if you accomplish a feast on a day that's not the feast, what does God have to say about that? 86 that, and no good. God's not for that. As a matter of fact, we're going to see some of the Jews, they're going to get in trouble for that. They're going to celebrate things on day, or they're going to not celebrate things when God says to, and they're going to be judged, and many of them killed for it. Jesus came to fulfill the law at the appropriate time, because that's the essence of righteousness. So it's not that he was like afraid, like, oh no, I better. No, the appropriate time. Because we're going to see next week, he's going to barge into Jerusalem, arms open. And they're not going to touch him yet. Verse 55. Now the Passover of the Jews was near. This is that last week of Jesus' life. And many went up to Jerusalem out of the country before the Passover to purify themselves. So they were seeking for Jesus and were saying to one another as they stood in the temple, what do you think, that he will not come to the feast at all? Now the chief priests and the Pharisees had given orders that if anyone knew where he was to report it so that they might seize him. Again, this is the last Passover. From this point forward, this is the last week of Jesus' life. And John is going to spend chapter 12 to 21 on that last week. That's how prominent it is. That's how important it is. He's the only one that does that, by the way. All the other gospel writers, they don't put that much emphasis on this last week. John does. Because John has a purpose. And his purpose is that you believe. And that's what he's going to do. But they seek to kill Jesus, and that's how we end the service. We're right on time. Tonight at 6 p.m., we're in 1 Samuel chapter 6. We're going to see David. He's going to go to Kiryat Yearim, and he's going to get the Ark of the Covenant of God and bring it to Jerusalem. And along the way, God is going to strike one of his men. And we're going to see that David acted in haste. David acted... What's the word I'm looking for here? He was foolish. And he thought that he could do things his way instead of God's. And for that, God is going to strike one of his men dead. And if you're free tonight, come and see why. Otherwise, Father, we thank you for being God. And we thank you for your goodness, mercy, and grace. We thank you, Lord, for your faithfulness. And we